What is going on, guys? My name is Brandino and welcome back to the channel. Once again, we're going to be reacting to another Titanic video. Once again, it's going to be also historic travels. And once again, there is no once again, I've not seen this one before. But today we are watching how the wreck of the Titanic was found. Despite how much I love like Titanic and watched it, I actually don't know how it was found. Like, I want to know, yeah. I actually don't know this, I feel like. Which is kind of bad. I feel like it's kind of bad for me. Yeah, that's very bad.
On April 14th, 1912, at 11:40 p.m., Titanic struck an iceberg on the starboard side below the waterline, and in just under 3 hours, the entire ship broke apart and sank. And this is the last time anybody would see Titanic until the year 1985. In 1985, the wreck of the Titanic was discovered by this man, Robert Ballard. And this video is going to cover his story on how he found the wreck of the Titanic.
Okay.
And what challenges he had to overcome in order to find the most.
It's going to be interesting.
Why did it take so long for us to try to find the Titanic? Well, you got to remember, the first thing is the Titanic sunk in 1912. So we had to wait on technology to be developed over time that we could even attempt to look for the ship.
Bro, imagine like because of the amount of technology we did not have back then to be compared with do now. Like back then, there must have been so many divers, so many unprofessionals like trying to get down that low just to find a shipwreck. That must be like a very, very famous tourist spot. Just people just go out there, scuba diving underneath to thinking they could see the Titanic from that far or something like that. Imagine the scenes. Imagine.
There's no way they could have found Titanic in the early 1900s.
No way. No way.
Anyway. So there actually were other attempts to try to find Titanic before the expedition in 1985. However, all of those failed. Titanic was just gone. It was just a big mystery.
It went too far under.
To the ship. And it wasn't until Robert Ballard took on the mission in 1985 that any real progress was made in trying to find the wreck. You see, there were two really big challenges that we had to overcome in order to even begin to look for the Titanic, and this is another reason why the other expeditions failed. The first reason is we didn't really know where the Titanic had went down. Now, the Titanic did send out a distress call, and it did send out coordinates, so we did have a general idea as to where the ship was.
Yeah.
However, what we didn't know at the time was that the distress signal, or the distress coordinates the Titanic sent out, were not the correct location for where the ship was. And you see,
well, I didn't help them.
Due to just incompetence with the Titanic's crew to broadcast the wrong distress signal. They were more or less accurate. You got to remember, this was 1912. It's not like today where all you have to do is look at a computer to figure out your exact longitude and latitude. Back then, there was a mathematical formula. They had to use the stars, you know. They had other methods that they had to do in order to figure out exactly what their coordinates were. Now, on the night the Titanic sank, there were several corrections made to the ship's position over time. It's like the first distress call, they were pretty far off, and then they caught it, and then they updated it, and they were still not exactly right, but they weren't as far off as they were the first time. So they did attempt to get the coordinates more accurate as time went on. But with everything else that was going on, trying to get the ship evacuated, they just didn't get the right coordinates sent out.
But this was like accurate. Like it's not exactly exact coordinates, but it was like they had like a little circle of the location it could be in. That's where like trying to search it and all that stuff. Yeah, but obviously, yeah, saying that one like coordinates, like yeah, it wasn't the smartest thing to do. It wasn't a great idea. Yeah, so it did not turn out great whatsoever.
The Titanic's rescue ship, it knew the general area where the Titanic was.
Yeah.
And when it was on its way there, they actually encountered the Titanic's lifeboats earlier than they intended.
I assume they would. Yeah.
That was another clue as to the Titanic wasn't exactly where the distress signal and the logs we had set.
Also the bodies as well. I mean, also the bodies as well. Like the amount of people in the water is like freezing their nuts off as well. Like lifeboats, any piece of like jewelry, anything that can float basically from the wreck. Like it must have left a huge mark onto like everything. Yeah.
The incredible depth the Titanic is in. Remember, the Titanic sunk in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
So it's not just like the Titanic is in 400 or 500 feet of water. The wreck of the Titanic exists 2.5 miles beneath the surface. So it would be a long time after the sinking before technology would advance enough to even give us a chance to find the wreck.
Yeah, it takes like 5 hours to get down there.
You see, he always wanted to try to find the Titanic, but you see, there wasn't as much worldwide interest in the Titanic as there is today, so funding for the expedition was a problem. So in the 1980s, he actually made a deal with the U.S. military in order to get funding in order to try to go out and find the Titanic. The military wasn't interested in finding the Titanic. You know, there was no real game.
Oh wow, that is history. How dare they? That is history.
They didn't really care about a relic of history. So that was a problem, and they didn't want to give out a bunch of money for his expedition in order to try to find it.
Wow, okay.
But there was something else that they needed help with. You see, in the 1960s, the U.S. military lost 2 submarines. The submarines the U.S. lost were the Thresher
and the other submarine was called the Scorpion.
I knew the Thresher, but I didn't know about Scorpion. That's a new one to me. What's the Scorpion then? I had to read up about that. I never knew about Scorpion. I knew that the other one, yeah.
So they wanted to make sure that the Soviet Union wasn't snooping around these submarines' wreck sites. So Robert Ballard said, okay, that's fine. You give me funding to go and look for the Titanic. Well, actually, let me recorrect that. You give me funding to go out and find those 2 submarines for you. And then if there's time left over, then I can use that time to go and look for the Titanic.
Ah, I get it.
The Titanic can be our cover story as well. And the U.S. military loved it. They're like, that's perfect. So that is how Robert Ballard got his funding in order to try to find.
That was actually quite smart.
And
That's
this
actually quite
plan
smart.
worked out perfectly. You see, he was able to find the wreck site of the Thresher and the Scorpion so quickly and document the entire debris field of the submarines that he still had 12 days left to go and actually look for the
12
Titanic.
days, wow.
And that is when
Yeah,
he
loads
actually
time then.
happened to find the ship.
Robert Ballard couldn't have known this at the time, but looking for the Thresher and the Scorpion were key things into helping him figure out how to find the Titanic. You see, when those 2 submarines went down, they ended up imploding. And that meant that everything inside of the submarine spewed out and just fell all over the ocean floor.
And we've already covered the imploded story. Like, you cannot survive anyone else going down with the ship. You cannot survive. You literally survive like 2 seconds, and that's it. You're gone. You're imploded with the ship, mate. Yeah, we've already covered that story.
If you try to find a ship's debris, it's much easier than trying to find the ship itself. So he's like, okay, well, if I could do that with the Thresher and the Scorpion, can I do that with Titanic? Because Titanic broke apart on the surface, so the debris field might
I like how it has the
larger
model out as well, like to the
than
show.
These 2 submarines. And that's what he did. He took a look at where the Carpathia picked up the Titanic survivors, and he goes, okay, and now let's try to take into account errors in navigation at the time, or errors in the actual coordinates that the ship was. Remember, the Titanic didn't broadcast the right location as to where it was. So he's like, okay, so let's make a search area of about 10 miles.
Okay.
And let's try to use that 10-mile zone and do sweeps back and forth with a ship and try to find some of Titanic's debris.
And this idea turned out to be the best thing he could do in order to try to find the ship. As you can see from this picture, this is a map of Titanic's debris field.
He really went in depth with this thing then, didn't he? He went really in depth.
Objects you see around these 2 pieces, those are all parts of Titanic's debris.
Okay.
So if Robert Ballard can find just one of those fragments, he would know that he is close to the actual wreck. So
There's going to be loads, though, loads of them.
He took the 10-mile search area that he put in for navigation or coordinate errors with the Titanic's position and just did these sweeps. He spaced it 0.9 miles apart and just drove his ship back and forth in hopes that he would come across.
God, that must be so boring, though, just doing the same route all over.
Trick worked. They began to notice some debris in the search area, but they weren't sure if it was Titanic. And then the first thing identifiable that they saw was one of Titanic's boilers. At this moment, they knew that they had found the Titanic. One quick little footnote here, this is the vessel that Robert Ballard's team designed to look around at the bottom of the ocean for the Titanic. See, this robotic vessel was connected to the ship on the surface, and they essentially dragged this robotic vessel with the ship above while they tried to search for the Titanic's debris field.
What Robert Ballard and his team accomplished during the dive to find Titanic is nothing short of mind-blowing. They used brand new underwater cameras with a combination of sonar technology and operating at those.
I suppose I still had that then, though, to be fair.
To find this ship in the middle of the ocean was literally a needle in a haystack, just trying to figure everything out. Now, what ended up happening when they actually came up on the Titanic's hull? They're operating their little submersible at the bottom of the ocean. And what Robert Ballard said was the first thing he noticed was complete blackness, you know, because it's pitch black at 2.5 miles.
That'd be so scary. Forget that. Forget that.
He noticed this giant wall, which was Titanic's hull, up here in front of the submarine. So the submarine is at the bottom of the ocean, say my fingers of the sub, and it just came up, and then boom, there's just this giant wall in front of the sub. And what Robert said was the first thing he identified was this red paint at the bottom of the ship. They didn't come up on the front of the Titanic, they came in on the side.
I know what it feels like. I remember playing on VR, we were playing VR Titanic, like, I literally just hit, she got in front of me, and also there's a big, massive freaking wall. Like, it was quite a creepy experience. It's actually quite scary, even in VR as well.
What they decided to do was bring the sub up. Now, the submarine had these little weights on it.
I feel like I would feel big objects, that's why. I don't know.
They released those weights, and as soon as they did, they no longer had control of the sub. They couldn't control it up or down, move it around. And when those weights dropped, the submarine was going to come straight up to the surface. And what he said ended up happening was, as the submarine came up, he just went past all these windows and just saw the basic outline of the ship. As
that would be cool, though, to see.
Went
That's
up
sick.
above the wreck. And that was his first official look at the Titanic. They didn't look around and examine it. They just found it, documented it, and then came up to the surface.
That must be so cool.
Now, I tried my own little experiment where I tried to recreate this the best I could.
Oh, okay.
Using my bigger Titanic model and a flashlight, just to kind of
bigger Titanic model, okay.
An idea of what it must have looked like when Robert.
I'm intrigued to see this.
The ship.
I want you to imagine that this darkness you see is what the cameras on your submarine are seeing as you look for the Titanic's hull and wreck. And then out of the darkness, you notice a tiny little bit of red paint and a giant wall.
He's probably got the same one as me.
In the darkness.
Yeah.
At this moment, you know you have found the Titanic.
You know what?
So
he's created this so well.
Submersible, and as the submarine begins
he's created this quite well.
Past the Titanic's portholes and windows, that you get your first look.
Has he got the same one as me?
As you pass the boat deck, your lights shine on it one last time as you leave the ship behind.
You know what? No, he done a really good job on recreating that. And again, always informative. Everyone always says like they love this channel and they think it's very factual, informative. They love this guy as well. Everyone, make sure you give him some support. He knows what he's saying. He's very factual. Yes. Yeah, well, I think he's got the same model as me. I'm not sure. Mine actually might be bigger. I don't know. You call that a model, mate? Look at my one. Look how big my model is. Yeah, he's probably got the same one as me, but still, yeah, I got a big model.